In the dark corners of America's crime history, one name sends chills down the spine: Isabella Carter. Once an ordinary woman, her descent into violence turned her into one of the most feared killers in modern history. But how did a seemingly normal woman become a ruthless murderer, taking 20 lives without remorse? Isabella was born into chaos. Raised in a broken home in Chicago, her childhood was a battleground of violence and neglect. Her father, an abusive alcoholic, terrorized the family, while her mother, too afraid to escape, suffered in silence. Isabella learned early that the world was cruel and that power belonged to those who took it by force. As a teenager, she ran away, drifting through foster homes and juvenile centers, where she developed a cold and calculating nature. She mastered manipulation, deceiving social workers, charming police officers, and conning people into giving her what she wanted. But beneath her innocent facade, darkness brewed. The first murder. At the age of 22, Isabella's rage exploded. Her first victim, a man named Daniel Reeves, a wealthy businessman who had promised her a better life but instead exploited her. One night, after a heated argument, Isabella snapped. She lured Daniel to an abandoned motel under the pretense of a private meeting. Once inside, she drugged him, tied him up, and, with chilling precision, slit his throat. She didn't panic. She didn't run. Instead, she watched as the life drained from his eyes, savoring the power she held over him. The murder was ruled as a robbery gone wrong, and with no solid evidence, Isabella walked free. But for her, this was just the beginning. The killing spree. Fueled by her first taste of blood, Isabella grew bolder. Over the next 5 years, she executed a series of brutal murders, each one more horrifying than the last. Her victims varied: men, women, even law enforcement officers. Some she lured with charm, others she executed in cold blood. The media dubbed her the Black Widow because of her ability to trap her victims before killing them mercilessly. Despite growing pressure from law enforcement, Isabella remained a ghost, always one step ahead. Her methods were meticulous. She would change her appearance frequently, dyeing her hair, altering her style, and even using fake identities. She forged alliances with criminals, bribed officers, and erased evidence with terrifying efficiency. But no criminal can remain hidden forever. The capture Isabella's downfall came unexpectedly. A routine traffic stop in Nevada turned into her worst nightmare. A sharp-eyed officer, Detective Ryan Foster, recognized her from a wanted poster. He played it cool, pretending to check her license while secretly calling for backup. Realizing the trap, Isabella tried to flee, but the officers were faster. They surrounded her, weapons drawn. For the first time in years, she had no way out. Even in handcuffs, she smirked, whispering to the detective, "This isn't over." The sentence. The trial of Isabella Carter was one of the most sensational in history. The prosecution detailed her gruesome murders, presenting overwhelming evidence: fingerprints, surveillance footage, and even her own recorded confessions. The courtroom was packed with victims' families, journalists, and spectators eager to witness the fate of the country's most dangerous woman. Despite her cold demeanor, the jury wasted no time. Verdict: guilty. Sentence: life in prison without parole. As she was led away, Isabella didn't cry, didn't beg. Instead, she smirked, because deep down, she knew this was just another game. Little did anyone know, the real horror was yet to come. Isabella Carter entered Blackridge Federal Penitentiary, a maximum security prison built for the most dangerous criminals in America. The moment she stepped inside, every eye was on her. Inmates whispered, guards tightened their grips on their batons, and the warden, Samuel Hayes, watched her like a hawk. Most prisoners entered Blackridge broken, but Isabella walked in like she owned the place. She knew that to survive and eventually escape, she had to play the long game. And that started with manipulation. Manipulating the system. From the first day, Isabella studied the prison's dynamics: who held the power, which guards could be swayed, who were the weak links. She didn't rush. Instead, she played her cards carefully. She started with the inmates. She offered protection to the weak, making them loyal to her. She befriended the prison's most feared gang, proving her worth with her sharp mind and ruthless attitude. She gathered information about guards, schedules, blind spots in security, every detail that could be useful. Then, she moved on to the guards. She flirted with the lonely ones, planting seeds of doubt in their minds about their loyalty to the prison. She manipulated the corrupt ones, offering them money from her outside connections. She blackmailed those with secrets, making them her pawns. Soon, Isabella had power, not just among the prisoners, but over the very people meant to keep her locked away. Corruption behind bars. Blackridge Prison wasn't just a place for criminals, it was a breeding ground for corruption. The system was broken, and Isabella knew how to use it to her advantage. She bribed a guard to smuggle in contraband, cell phones, cigarettes, even weapons. She made deals with the warden himself, offering silence in exchange for favors. She controlled the flow of drugs inside, making even the most violent criminals answer to her. With each passing month, Isabella wasn't just surviving, she was running the prison from the inside. The escape plan begins. With control over the system, Isabella set her eyes on the next step: escape. But this wouldn't be an ordinary prison break. She had no intention of digging tunnels or sneaking out in a laundry truck. No, her plan was bigger, bolder. She needed the help of the police themselves. She identified the most corrupt officers, those who already had a price. She promised them a fortune if they got her out. She used her influence to ensure that if anyone talked, they wouldn't live to see another day. The groundwork was set. The guards who were once her captors were now her co-conspirators. The prison she was supposed to be locked in had become her playground. All she needed now was the perfect moment to walk out of Blackridge like she was never there. For 2 years, Isabella Carter built her empire inside Blackridge Federal Penitentiary. She controlled inmates, blackmailed guards, and had enough dirt on the warden to keep him silent. But she didn't want control over a prison. She wanted freedom. Her escape plan had been in motion for months. Every detail was carefully crafted. The guards weren't just looking the other way, they were helping her. The escape wouldn't be a desperate run through fences or a risky tunnel crawl. She was going to walk out the front door. She waited for the perfect moment, a late-night prisoner transfer. Blackridge frequently moved high-risk inmates under extreme security measures, but Isabella's inside connections had ensured a flaw in the system: the execution of the plan. It was 2 a.m. when it happened. A fake transfer order was issued under the warden's name, stating that Isabella was being moved to a secretive government facility. A team of 4 corrupt guards, dressed in full riot gear, arrived at her cell. To the untrained eye, it looked like a routine high-security transport. They escorted her through the hallways, bypassing multiple security checkpoints using forged clearance codes and pre-arranged distractions. The final checkpoint was the toughest, the main gate, guarded by an officer not in on the plan. But Isabella had planned for this. One of the corrupt guards created a false emergency in another wing of the prison, a staged riot between rival gangs. With all attention diverted, the officer at the main gate barely glanced at the transfer papers before opening the doors. And just like that, Isabella Carter was out, vanishing without a trace. A black unmarked SUV was waiting outside the prison, driven by a dirty cop from the local police department. Isabella slid into the back seat, exchanging a cold smile with the driver. "I told you I'd get out," she whispered. They drove through the city with zero police pursuit. The ones who should have been chasing her were the same ones who had helped her escape. She changed into civilian clothes inside the car, cutting her hair short and slipping on a blonde wig. They drove her to an abandoned safe house where she had everything ready: cash, fake IDs, weapons, and a burner phone. By the time the sun rose, Isabella Carter had vanished. The media outrage. The next morning, the news exploded. Breaking news: convicted serial killer escapes maximum security prison. Blackridge officials claimed it was an internal error. The FBI launched a nationwide manhunt. Families of Isabella's 20 victims demanded answers. The escape was too clean, too perfect. The public knew something was wrong. How could one of the most dangerous criminals in America walk out of a maximum security facility without a single alarm being triggered? The media tore into law enforcement, calling it the biggest prison scandal in U.S. history. Talk shows, podcasts, and journalists all speculated the same thing. Someone in the system helped her. Law enforcement's response. Under extreme pressure, the government promised a full investigation, but behind closed doors, officials were panicking. If the truth got out, that high-ranking officers had been bribed, the entire justice system would be exposed as corrupt. The warden, Samuel Hayes, resigned within 48 hours. He claimed he had no knowledge of Isabella's escape, but everyone knew better. The FBI put Isabella Carter on the most wanted list, offering a $5 million reward for any information leading to her capture. But Isabella? She was already 10 steps ahead. The escape of Isabella Carter sent shockwaves across the nation. The FBI, local law enforcement, and federal agencies all vowed to hunt her down and bring her to justice. Her face was plastered across every news outlet, billboards, and social media. But while the public believed the authorities were chasing her, the reality was much darker. The same corrupt officers who had helped Isabella escape were now pretending to pursue her, while secretly ensuring she remained untouchable. Fake leads were fed to the media, sending search teams to wrong locations. False reports claimed she was spotted in different states, creating confusion. Corrupt officials buried evidence that could have exposed her true whereabouts. The message was clear: Isabella wasn't just running, she was being protected. The public's fury. As days turned into weeks, frustration grew. The public demanded answers. How could a maximum security prisoner vanish without a trace? Why were there no credible leads despite a $5 million reward? Were high-ranking officials involved in helping her escape? Victims' families took to the streets, protesting outside government buildings. Journalists dug deeper, exposing inconsistencies in the official investigation. The pressure on law enforcement was mounting. The government needed a scapegoat. The warden of Blackridge, Samuel Hayes, was arrested and charged with negligence and conspiracy. But many believed he was just a pawn in a bigger game, a distraction to protect the real culprits. The FBI's silent investigation. While the public manhunt was a sham, a few FBI agents weren't convinced. One of them was Special Agent Mark Delaney, a relentless investigator who had spent years studying Isabella Carter. He didn't buy the official story. Something felt too perfect about her escape. Why had the security cameras malfunctioned that night? How did a prisoner with zero outside connections manage to coordinate such a flawless escape? Why were some of the officers involved mysteriously reassigned right after the breakout? Delaney started digging. He traced financial records, looking for suspicious transactions. What he found was shocking: large, unexplained money transfers to multiple officers connected to Isabella's case. Someone had paid for her escape. A lead that changes everything. Just as Delaney was closing in on the truth, an anonymous whistleblower contacted him. The message was clear: "You're looking in the right place, but if you don't stop, you'll end up like the others." Attached was a secret list of officers and officials who had either helped Isabella escape or were working to keep her hidden. Some of the names belonged to high-ranking law enforcement figures. The hunt for Isabella Carter was no longer just about finding a fugitive. It was about exposing one of the biggest corruption scandals in U.S. history. But there was one problem. If Delaney had this information, then so did Isabella, and she never let anyone live if they got too close. Special Agent Mark Delaney knew he was getting close. Too close. The evidence was undeniable. High-ranking law enforcement officers had aided Isabella Carter's escape. If this information went public, it would be the biggest corruption scandal in modern history. But Delaney also knew something else. He was being watched. His office was ransacked, his phone tapped. A black SUV followed him everywhere. Someone within the system wanted him silenced. Meanwhile, the public's anger reached a boiling point. Protests erupted outside FBI headquarters. News outlets ran exposés on how the police had failed to capture Isabella for months. The pressure was immense. Someone had to be held responsible. But Delaney wasn't interested in scapegoats. He wanted Isabella Carter herself. The final lead, one of Delaney's undercover sources, a former Blackridge guard, reached out with a crucial piece of intel: a safe house where Isabella was allegedly hiding. The location? An abandoned mansion in the Louisiana bayou. Delaney knew it was risky. He suspected a trap, but he couldn't wait. If he hesitated, Isabella would disappear forever. He assembled a small, trusted team, agents he knew weren't compromised. No media, no backup from local police, just a direct hit. But the confrontation. It was 3 a.m. when Delaney's team arrived at the bayou. They moved in silently, their boots sinking into the damp mud. The house was dark, but the front door was slightly ajar, an invitation. Inside, the atmosphere was eerie. Flickering candlelight, papers scattered on the floor, a half-empty wineglass on the table. She had been here, recently. Then, a gunshot. One of Delaney's men dropped to the ground, blood pooling beneath him. From the shadows, a voice echoed through the room. "You just couldn't let it go, could you, Agent Delaney?" Isabella Carter stepped into the dim light. Gun in hand, smile on her face. A deadly standoff, Delaney raised his weapon. "It's over, Isabella, surrender." She chuckled. "Oh, Mark, you still think you're in control?" From behind her, 2 armed men stepped out. Dirty cops, her protection, her insurance policy. Delaney's heart pounded. It wasn't just Isabella he was up against. It was the corrupt system itself. The choice. Isabella walked closer, her eyes cold and calculating. "You have 2 choices, Agent," she said. "You arrest me, and the people protecting me will make sure you never make it out of here alive. Or, you walk away, and you live." The other agents shifted uneasily. The truth was clear. If they tried to take her, they wouldn't survive. Delaney's hands clenched around his gun. He had spent years chasing justice, exposing the corruption, but now, faced with the woman at the center of it all. Could he really stop her? The shocking ending. There was a single gunshot, but when the smoke cleared, Isabella Carter was gone. No body, no blood, just an open back door leading into the endless darkness of the bayou. Delaney collapsed against the wall, his mind racing. Had he hesitated? Had she escaped again? The FBI arrived hours later, but the mansion was empty. The corrupt cops were nowhere to be found. Isabella had disappeared. Again. Justice or cover-up? The official report? Isabella Carter was likely killed in the raid, her body lost in the swamp. But Delaney knew better. She